Now, for a long time, Crimson Armor has been a really good option for a cheap damaging armor set that just deals a lot of damage. Its base stats are actually pretty good, and for the price, nobody can be complaining. One of the main things that made Crimson Armor so good is the swipe ability. Essentially how it's always works is if you kill 10 mobs in a row, you basically accumulate 10 stacks. And at that point when you hit an enemy, not only will you just deal the regular damage, like the damage that I've just dealt, the ammo will then swipe. So typically you'll usually deal upwards of double damage to that same enemy, which is really useful when you're trying to kill an enemy that you can't kill in one hit, because most of the time, the swipe will do the work for you. Now recently there's been considerable change to the Crimson Armor on the alpha server, and initially it looked like a huge buff, meaning that the swipe also means that you gain more ferocity, and in addition to that, generally more damage. The higher tier that your Crimson Armor is, essentially the more damage it will deal and the stronger the swipe will be. Now this change to Crimson Armor and other Crimson Isle armor sets, along with the unsold binding of a ton of items in the Crimson Isles and a few other changes, was supposed to come out a couple of days ago. However, this part of the update was pushed back because, well, and I kind of know now, that they were, well, fiddling with, I guess, the balancing. Now, the Crimson Armor has changed even more, and I believe it's for the worse. Initially, when the alpha first released, it looked like a huge buff, and now this looks like a pretty sizable nerf. So the swipe ability now reads at 10 stacks, swipe in a random direction, dealing 1 swipe damage to mobs in its path. If your armor is infernal, this is the exact same, other than instead of 1 damage, you'll be getting 2 damage from the swipe. Now on face value this might not seem that bad, but we actually have to look at what it's saying, because it's not great. A 10 stack swipe in a random direction. Okay, so does that mean that if there's no mobs around, the swipe will basically be applied to the mob that you're killing? So if you can't kill it in one hit, you'll still get the swipe damage? Or are you just not able to swipe the same enemy that you've hit at all? On reflection, the way that this stat actually works is not really too different at all to how it works currently on the main server. There's a few quirks that need to be ironed out, and yeah, we're going to go ahead and test this armor out and see how it's really changed. But before we do, at the moment, we're actually trying to beat the population of Aurora with subscribers. Now, the population of Aurora is roughly 80,000. Once we hit 80,000 subscribers, we're actually going to visit Aurora and we'll be able to claim that we have more subscribers than the population of the whole country, which would be pretty cool, so make sure to subscribe to make that happen. If you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS, it gets yourself 5% off. You should also join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer slayers and dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. Now, honestly, the actual ability didn't read too differently prior to this alpha. At 10 stacks, also swipe in a random direction, hitting every enemy in the path of the swipe. Now, it doesn't give us any indication of how much damage we'll deal, however, it does kind of go down the same road of swiping in a random direction. Okay, we're in the Crimson Isles, we've got our 10 stacks, so let's see what the damage is in our swipe. Okay, so our regular hit is 600k. Our swipe seems to be probably somewhere similar. Okay, it didn't do it that time. Crimson Armor can be a bit temperamental at times. Okay, work. Is it going to work now? Nope. Okay, how about now? No? Surely no. Okay, our swipe was 584k and our regular hit is 611k. I'm gonna go on the. I'm just gonna go off the alpha and go back onto the regular server and see what the difference is. I'm gonna use the same setup. Okay, we're on the normal server now. Something else that I've noticed as well is, you know how you can just right click with the hype and you can build stacks, or you can basically use magic damage with the Crimson Armor, and you know it will accumulate the stacks and the swipe will also work. Yeah, that doesn't work anymore on the alpha. That's just not a thing. Yeah, our damage is way lower on the alpha, and I think that is something to do with maybe the fact that the damage actually does only count for melee hits. So if we observe, we hit for 612, but our swipe is 1.5 million. Now on the alpha, our swipe is 500k, 580k, but our swipe also appears as a critical hit on the alpha, and it doesn't on the regular server. Look, it's just regular damage. It's not crit damage. So what's really happening here is we're essentially losing 50% of our damage in this situation. Because our overall damage on the alpha is what, 611k plus 584, so it's the best part of 1.2 million. Our damage here is 612, 615k plus 1.55 mil, which is closer to 2.2 million, which is, yeah, okay, maybe not 50%, but maybe we've lost 40% of our damage. And like I said before, people who used to Crimson Mage can't do that anymore because, of course, our swipe works on, you know, these enemies when we're using a Hyperion. Like, the swipe damage is actually appearing. Whereas you can't build stacks and you can't actually use the swipe. The swipe ability doesn't work on the alpha because, well, now the swipe is, well, a crit hit. And you're not going to be able to get a crit hit with magical damage. So it's not only a Hyperion that's not going to work, it's also going to be a Midas Staff. Now, I know people use Midas Staff and Crimson to kill Enderman Slayer, so you're not going to be able to do that anymore. Well, you are going to be able to, you're just not going to get the swipe, which is what did majority of the damage. And as we can see here, right click and we're not going to build stacks. I'm going to go ahead and get 10 stacks and show that the swipe doesn't work. Okay, we have 10 stacks, and now see, we're not swiping. It just doesn't work. Wait, oh, does it? Wait, is that working? Oh, it does work! Alright, this is truly strange then. I don't really get it. Nah, it doesn't work. Just me being stupid. Now, to me, it kind of does make sense, considering a set like Crimson Armor is, you know, never really was intended to be used for, well, Mage. But because of the swipe, it was so good. But, yeah, maybe not anymore, if this is actually how it releases. Now, you've got to remember that if you had Infernal Crimson Armor, then you would still be doing more damage with the swipe, because the swipe scales. So at the moment, I'm only dealing 1.2 times swipe damage. That's because my boots are hot. And my leggings mean that we actually deal 1.5 times swipe damage, and that's because my leggings are burning. But if it was all Infernal, then it would be 2 times, so we would deal more damage. But at the same time, in terms of percentages, it won't be any different, because I was tested on the alpha and on, you know, the regular server with the same set of armor. Now, what would actually be interesting to know is it says that 10 stacks swipe in a random direction, dealing 1.5 times swipe damage to mobs in its path. Now, what does this actually even mean? Like, what is this a calculation of? Because if you're taking our regular, like, hit at 611k, it makes no sense for our swipe to be lower, in my opinion. But I don't really know what the swipe is being based off. I would have thought that it would take our regular crit hit that we've done with that weapon and times it by 1.5. Obviously, that's not how it works. But I don't know where that figure comes from in that case. I would have thought it would still be higher than our regular hit. But anywho. Now, I'm not going to lie, this really is a very, very substantial nerf. You know, there was literal metas to doing Enderman Slayer really, really quickly using the Crimson Swipe and a Midas Staff, and of course that's been killed at this point. And just for anyone that uses Crimson Armor on a daily basis who might rely on the swipe to be, you know, finishing off the mobs, then you might find that, you know, that doesn't quite happen anymore, because realistically, unless you upgrade your armor to maybe Infernal, then you're not going to be dealing close to the amount of damage than you were before. And to be honest, even if you had Infernal, it's not going to come close. Now, something else to note that, well, of course, with this update and what was supposed to, you know, be brought up this update previously, one of the main things was all of the Crimson Isle items being on soulbound. And it looks like that is going to go ahead. The Aurora seems to be, I think, the same, with just pointless ability. I really, really don't understand what the point of adding that ability was. Oh, that's surely new. Terra, each stat grants 10% damage and 3% arrow speed. I guess something to try would be if Crimson stacks and the swipe still works with the Terminator, because previously on the alpha it did work. Oh, I think it actually does, because we're building stacks of it too. Okay, do we swipe? Oh, we do. Okay. Now, even though the swipe isn't as good as it was, at least we're going to be dealing more damage with a bow, whether it's a Juju or a Terminator with Crimson Armor, which makes it interesting. Because they seem to have buffed Terra. But each stack grants plus 10% damage and 3% arrow speed. Okay. That's interesting. I'm going to go back down to 1 stack, and I'm going to gradually build it up and see if we can tell the difference. Okay. Let's see. So our regular damage here is 685k. So with an extra stack, I didn't really see that. Let's see, with 3 stacks, 715. Okay, so it's definitely increasing. That's pretty cool. 735. 747, okay, you know what, this is actually pretty good. So with 10 stacks, 792k, that's almost a 100k increase. Obviously this is using Infernal Terror. That's pretty cool. And to be honest, the arrow speed is, I think, pretty noticeable. I mean, that seems a lot quicker than it did before. Okay, so Forever with the goggles were way better than an Aurora helmet. And it's been like that for ages, and that's just simply because Aurora never used to give ability damage, and Wither Goggles did. But now, the Aurora Helmet gives us ability damage, and a base Aurora Helmet is giving us 16 ability damage, and an Infernal Aurora Helmet is giving us 40 ability damage, along with 479 intelligence. Now, these Wither Goggles are giving us almost 50 ability damage, but only 340 intelligence. So let's test them out against each other. Okay, so currently with this setup, so this is using our Hyperion. I did max all the items, that's why it's failed. Don't ask, it doesn't matter, we're going to be comparing both, like, with the exact same other gear anyway. Okay, so with Wither Goggles, we get 5,395 mana. And the damage that we actually deal is, let me find the zombie on their own, 2.744 million. So we're going to switch out our Wither Goggles with this Aurora Helmet. This one is Infernal, it's 5-starred, so it matches the rest of my armor. Let's see how this performs. Okay, so we now have 5,596 mana, which is, you know, considerably more mana. That's around about 200 more mana. And as for the damage, it's 2.76. So it seems that an Infernal Aurora Helmet is going to be better than Wither Goggles, because you also have to consider the fact that on this Aurora Helmet, you can also put mana regen and mana pool on it, which is going to give you even more intelligence and, of course, more mana regeneration. So it's settled. The Wither Goggles, you know, if you have all the money in the world, they're no longer the best item to go for if you're Mage. It's definitely the Aurora Helmet. Of course, in dungeons, Wither Goggles is still going to be better because Aurora's not dungeonizable, so they're not useless. But this makes so much sense. So much sense. The fact that Wither Goggles were better than Infernal Aurora, it just made no sense. This makes sense. It really does. And I assume the prices of these god rolls are going to go up in price a lot, so I would get your hands on them if they're still cheap. So, all in all, a very, very interesting update. Crimson Armor has been nerfed quite substantially. Aurora Helmet has been buffed massively. Terror seems to also have received a buff. The thing is, though, is they release these alphas, and we just don't know if it's going to remain the same. You know, to be fair, in fairness, Crimson did seem a little bit too overpowered in the last alpha testing, but now they seem to have made it, you know, the complete opposite. Now, the good thing is you can still use your Terminator with Crimson Armor and benefit from the swipes, which is cool, but now you just can't use Mage weapons with Crimson, benefit from the swipes, which is, well, let's say an L. Anyway, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.